This tutorial will show how to complete and release analyses through the Complete and Release module of OpenELIS. When an electronic worksheet is used to complete analyses, the complete function of this module is not used. The complete function is only used when results are entered manually. The first procedure is to query for the analyses that I want to complete. I click the query button, enter the test name in the test field. I can also enter the method name if I need to narrow it down further. And then I choose the status. In this case, I want logged in as my analysis status, since all these analyses are in logged in status. I click the commit button, and I get my list. Notice when I click on an analysis row, the tabs for that sample are displayed down below in the lower pane. I'm going to go into the Test Results tab and enter my result for the first analysis. I need to click the Update button and then enter the value. I also should enter the date and time that I started the analysis. Go to the Analysis tab and enter that into the Started field. It's also a good idea to look at the tabs that have these red content indicators to the right of their headings. If I click on this one, I see that there's one internal sample note that I should read. The QA Events tab has 2 sample level QA events and 0 analysis level QA events. When I've looked through all these tabs and entered all the information that I needed, I click the Commit button. I have entered my results in these top 3 analyses and also entered the started date and time. I've also reviewed any tabs that have red content indicators. So I can now complete these top 3 analyses. In order to select them, I can click on the first row, hold down the Shift key, and then click on the last row. Likewise, if I want to select a non-continuous range of analyses, I can use the Control key. I'm going to go ahead and shift select these top 3 analyses once again, and then click the Complete button. Once the Complete button is clicked, OpenELIS attempts to lock the sample record for each of these selected analyses. It will also run any pertinent scriptlets again and refresh the data. Notice that a checkbox is now displayed before every analysis row on the screen. However, only the top 3 analyses are checked with a check mark. This allows me to keep my place so that I do indeed know that only the top 3 analyses are going to be completed upon committal. There are a few other things to note. The analysis status has changed from logged in to completed. Although these analyses will technically not be completed until the commit button is clicked, this lets the user know that they will go to completed status when that button is clicked. If I click on the Analysis tab, I see that the current date and time has been entered for the completion date and time. Same on the second analysis and the third analysis. If the user doesn't enter a started date and time, then the completed date and time will also be entered into the started field, as is the case in the third analysis. The third thing to note is that my username and the action I'm performing is recorded in the table in the lower right-hand corner of the Analysis tab. Once I'm convinced that everything is how I want it, I click the Commit button. The checkboxes disappear, and indeed, these three analyses have now been completed. I'm going to now select three other analyses for completion. Hold down my Shift key, choose them, and click Complete button. If I decide that I don't want to complete one of these analyses, I can always uncheck the box. I can also add other analyses to complete it at this time. Notice that in this case, I get an error message that the acid-fast bacillus analyte is required to have a value. And indeed, I see it doesn't have a value. So OpenELIS won't let me complete it at this moment. And notice that the complete box is not checked. In this example, I'm going to select both these analyses on sample at session number 1176 and try to complete them both. Both checkboxes are checked because they do indeed have the required values. The status of both of them went from logged in for the prep analysis to completed, and in prep for the analytical test to also completed. If I decide, though, that I don't want to complete one of these tests at the present time and try to uncheck that analysis, notice that both analyses on this sample have now been unchecked. The data has gone back to the previous state and also the status. So that the prep test has now gone back to logged in status and the analytical test back to in prep status. When using the complete and release module, it is also possible to query by a worksheet number. You go to the options drop-down menu, pick query by worksheet, enter the number of the worksheet, and then click OK. All of the analyses on that worksheet will be loaded into the complete and release screen. And you can, for instance, then release all of the analyses. My next example, I'm going to release some analyses. I'm going to query for them by the test name and the status. Of course, the status I want would be completed so that I can release them. Click the Commit button, and I can see there's 4 analyses ready to be released. As when completing analyses, the releaser should examine the Test Results tab, and any tabs with red content indicators. As I showed earlier in this tutorial, you can multi-select analyses by either using the Shift key to select a continuous range of analyses, Or you can also use the control key to select a non-continuous range. I'm going to select the first three analyses for release. I click the release button. OpenELIS will attempt to lock the sample record for each of these three analyses. Also, any pertinent scriptlets will be run one last time, and the data will be refreshed. So the analyst can go ahead and review once again, knowing that what they see on the screen will be released on the final report. Notice that the check boxes have been checked in front of the three analyses that I wish to release, and their analysis status now says released. This is to let me know that these three analyses will be released once I click the commit button. If I look at the analysis tab for each of these three analyses, I'll notice that my username and my action, in this case released, has been recorded in the table in the lower right-hand corner for each analysis. At this time, I can decide to not release an analysis if for some reason I think that some other action needs to be taken, and its status will go back to completed. I can also decide to add an additional analysis for release. Notice that its status changed to released, and my username was added in the user table as being the releaser. When I'm convinced that everything is accurate, I click the commit button, and all four analyses have now been released. If I look at the analysis tab for each one, I'll see that the current date and time has been entered in the released field. In the following example, I'm going to attempt to release this adult CF pregnancy test. This test has a scriptlet associated with it. I click the release button, check the box, but notice that OpenELIS will not let me check the box, and the status will not change to released. That's because there's an error. If I read the error down below, it says that a released cystic fibrosis carrier PCR test was not found on the partner sample. Please run the scriptlet for the latest data. So that tells the user that I'll have to look into that problem and fix it before I can release this analysis. So I'm going to abort this release. This example shows the value of OpenELIS locking the sample record and running the scriptlets one last time before attempting to release an analysis. In my next example, I'm going to go to into query mode and search by my test name and a status completed. I click the commit button, and I find that there are three analyses ready to be released. I can preview a copy of the final report by going to the Options menu and selecting Preview Final Report. This will pop up the final report in another tab in my Firefox browser. I can drag this tab side by side with the complete release screen so that I can compare between the two and make sure that my test results, any sample notes, and QA events all are displayed on the copy of the final report as I want them. Notice that the preview of the final report has an internal use watermark on it, so I don't accidentally send that out to the client. When I had previewed the first one, I can arrow down on my keyboard to the next one, and it will automatically refresh the preview. Another feature of the complete and release screen is that I can pop up the test request form in order to read its information and compare it to the information stored in the database record. I go to the options menu, check the preview TRF button, and the test request form pops up on a second tab of the Firefox web browser. I can move this tab side by side with the complete and release screen and compare the information between the two. If I use the arrow key on my keyboard to move to the next analyses, the test request form is refreshed.